Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of MarquetteHoops.com, the Marquette basketball show on My 24 with John Dodds. I'm Tom Pippins. Our producer is Jason Ruck. Steve the Homer True, the basketball play-by-play voice on the radio side. Man alive, he is just a wealth of information, especially, JD, when it comes to the span of coaches he has worked with. Very entertaining.
Steve's a great resource. He arrived in Milwaukee in 1989, and he's worked with many of the coaches from Bob Duquette, Kevin O'Neill, Mike Dean, Tom Crean, Buzz Williams, Wojo, and now Shaka. So it's interesting to hear his take. Now, do I agree with those who want Congress to declare Steve the Homer True as a national treasure? No. But I think he's just a great resource for us, and it should be very interesting for the fans.
He is a local treasure. We can at least say that without overstatement. Sure. All right, Steve the Homer True, a good friend of the program, and he is brought to you by Moonlight Graham, proud sponsor of the program. Moonlight Graham, modern dental benefits. Here's Homer. You go all the way back to Kevin O'Neill, right? So John was wanting to know, hey, how about a little, what most stands out about some of these coaches leading right into Shaka Smart?
I credit George Thompson. We met before we did our first game, which was a exhibition game of Kevin O'Neill. And I said, George, what's the tip? He goes, rule one, coaches are all crazy. They're all nuts. They're all wacko. But they're okay, so just don't be bothered by whatever happens. And that was the best line about Kevin O'Neill. Many of the stories you simply can't do on this show, but was what Jim McIlvaine said, and it explains it perfectly. He said, I swore at him for 4 years, and I've been swearing by him ever since. As crazy as he was, as off-the-charts things he did, deep down, the players all liked playing for him. And I remember thinking, why? This is crazy. And that's the essence of Kevin O'Neill. And then you'd have to ask the players. McIlvaine explained it. But there was a loyalty to him. So deep down, they must have known that he cared for them, would do anything for them, because they sure put up with a lot.
Back in my younger days, when I could stay out at Miss Katie's Diner till 2 a.m., Kevin and the staff would be in there, and Kevin would, the assistant coach, I asked him about Kevin O'Neill. He says he runs on different batteries than everyone else. He said, we're going to go home, and we have an 8 o'clock practice at the old gym, and it's 2 in the morning now. Kevin's going to get up at 6 a.m., and he's going to run 5 miles in preparation for the practice. And he said he's just highly wound up, and I credit Kevin as the guy that saved the program. I think there were memos at Marquette that I was told about that they were thinking of maybe 10 years after the championship going to maybe D3 or just pulling it back and not staying at D1. And I thank goodness he got there just at the right time after the disastrous Bob Duquette era. And he was able to get McIlvaine, Key, and Lagerman and kind of stop the bleeding.
I'll always believe that the history of Marquette and the faith that people had and interest in basketball, they would have turned it around, but eventually. But he certainly did it very quickly, immediately after certainly the toughest run with Duquette. So the speed with which they came back was all because of Kevin O'Neill and the standard that he set. He still believed that they could be a national power and did everything in that regard. And getting to the Sweet 16 was huge because it made everybody believe that Kevin was right. Marquette could be the Marquette they remember.
Then the next coach was Mike Dean. He was about to be hired from Siena over at Dayton, and Father Dulio intervened and was able to get him to come to Marquette. And the thing I remember about Mike Dean the most is he described you better than anyone I've ever heard. He was at a tip-off club meeting and you were there and he was introducing you and he said, here's Mike Dean. And I didn't know what a great athlete here's Steve Homer True. I didn't know what a great athlete he was. I challenged him to a tennis match. And he said, one thing about Homer, he looks like a geek, he tries to dress like a geek, he wants to act like a geek, but never underestimate him. He's a world-class athlete and he's incredibly smart. Here he is, Steve True. And I remember thinking at the time, that's the one person that gave the best description of you that I've ever heard.
Oh, that's nice. I don't know why it is that I don't remember that. I only remember playing him in tennis, and he was a great athlete. He was good at everything. He was a great basketball player. And we played many times, and it was always reasonably close. And we're getting toward a match, and he walks up to me and he says, "You're just a pathetic person. Every time you need a point, you hit the ball to the side where my bad eye is," which I think was his backhand. He said, "How can you be so low?" And I thought, watch this. I hit every ball to his forehand, still beat him. We never played again.
That's classic. Of course, Homer played tennis, right?
He believed until that day that he could beat me. After that day, he just accepted I ain't ever beaten him. And I wish I hadn't done that because it was fun playing him. And I've said this, the best game coach I've ever seen at Marquette. You give me equal players, I'll take him against any coach in the country. And I said that to Wojo, and he goes, "I think I'll take Coach K." And I said, "I knew you would, but let's play."
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
I asked Mike Dean about that. I said, "Mike, you're known as a great game coach. Give me an example of why you're so good." And he said, for example, we're playing Green Bay, and Norgard was their really good player. And I look at a tape, and when Norgard comes around to pick, he's a lights out shooter, but his elbow is in a certain position around the pick. So I'm telling our defensive players, keep your hand out and prevent that elbow from starting right where he wants to, have him move it a little bit, and his shot will be off. He said, "Dodsey, I'm an Einstein at this. It just comes to me. I can look at a tape." And I was talking to some people associated with Dick Bennett when he was at Wisconsin, and he said that Mike Dean was the most difficult coach to prepare for because he adjusted his entire offense and defensive scheme to your play. So they really didn't know exactly what to prepare for because he was going to have little different wrinkles. But by the same token, Rob Jeter, who was an assistant coach at Mike Dean, who played for Bo Ryan at Platteville, said that Mike Dean, because he did that, it drove me nuts. Bo Ryan ran the same 4 plays over and over and over, and we perfected them. There's Mike Dean, we never knew what we were doing. So it's kind of a back and forth.
The only other thing I would add is that, and in doing that, he was fearless. It didn't matter what he saw. He never said, "I'm not sure that'll work." Whatever he saw, he did it, and that's part of what I think is it could be a different approach, and everybody could say that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, and he'd go, "I don't care. That's what I'm doing. That's what I saw, and that's how we'll play." And he beat Bennett. I think he beat Bennett in was it Madison that he beat him? But the greatest thing Mike Dean ever did, his first year we played Cincinnati at home. This was Bob Huggins, and they were at their best. And Cincinnati beat us by 100. I mean, they played volleyball, just offensive reboundings. Then we go to Cincinnati, and I'm walking out, and Dean goes, "We have no chance to win. No chance to win." He said, "You watch my center, Amal McCaskill. He's going to come out, and the first 3 shots he's going to take are 3 threes." I'm like, I don't know. My center wants to be a point guard. This is crazy. Amal McCaskill comes out. What were the first 3 shots he took? Threes. Yeah. So I'm thinking, there's no chance. And Marquette beat Cincinnati. In Cincinnati. Right. I don't know what it was. And again, I'm not sure Huggins appreciated how good Dean was. But then you go back to the year that they win the conference tournament in the semifinals. With no Anthony Pieper, they beat Huggins in Cincinnati again, and John Cliff went crazy. So if you want to know how good Mike Dean was, that was another example. And he didn't care who he was coaching against. He didn't care what team it was, even when he didn't think they were good enough to win. They did it based on the reason that you just brought up.
Mike Dean could not be outwitted except when he went against Homer, a college-level tennis player. That was the okay. Now we bring in Tom Crean, and I guess when you say Tom Crean, you have to go Dwayne Wade. How about your thoughts, most memorable about the Crean era, Homer?
Yeah, he was difficult. He was a different difficult than Kevin O'Neill, I think, for the players. But if you bring in Dwayne Wade, you get a pass for life. It's that simple. And he had other players from Travis Diener to But if without Dwayne Wade, you wonder if Tom Crean would have been similar to Mike Dean. Pretty good teams, nothing ever that special, but Dwayne Wade changed all of that. And yes, it's sad that it took that long for Tom Crean to be in the Marquette Hall of Fame. I don't know why it did. It was just wrong. It just like Kevin O'Neill did, it took Marquette to a level where everybody thought we could win a national title. We get a Dwayne Wade, and they were that good. But yes, Tom Crean is defined as Dwayne Wade. Nothing else matters.
I remember in the opening press conference that he had, his daughter was probably 4 years old at the time, and she had a little cheerleader outfit on. And I interviewed Joni Crean. I said, tell me something about your husband that we should know about. And he said, and she said that when they were walking on the beach, on vacation, when they're doing anything, any family event, he's thinking about recruiting. He's thinking about how to get better. He's thinking about, he's always out there. And her dad was Jack Harbaugh, so the football coach, so she understood what that meant. And I was just struck by when he started at Marquette in '99, Marquette was in the old gym, was in the red, white, or blue division of Conference USA. I still don't remember which one it was. And maybe half the games were on TV. And by the end of it, they're in the Al McGuire Center, they're in the Final Four, they're in the Big East. I mean, it was one heck of a run.
My best Tom Crean story, I don't know how early it was, but it was very early in Dwayne Wade's season when he was playing, not when he sat out. And they tell me Tom Crean wants to see you in his office. And whenever Tom Crean wanted to see you in his office, I figured I got fired. I was getting fired for something. I'd done something that he didn't approve of. I didn't. And I sit down, and he walks in, and he's always walking. He goes, Homer, you just got to quit it. Homer, you just have to quit it. You cannot do this anymore. But what? He goes, I've heard, and I know, of course, he never listened to my radio show, but he must. He said, you got to quit this stuff on Dwayne Wade. I go, what? He goes, you're just building him up so much. You're putting so much extra pressure on him. You just got to tone this stuff down. And he keeps walking and walking and walking. He's waving. And I said, Coach, he's the best player I've ever seen, and it isn't even close. He looks at his watch and say, all right, Homer, I got to go. He'd given up hope, or he'd done, what he said. And of all that he did, I'll never, ever forget being in Alaska when Dwayne Wade played, because I swear it's how the people had to feel when they saw the Beatles at Liverpool. At the very beginning, I'm like, this is unbelievable. Players on the other teams are watching him play and forgetting who they're guarding. Marquette wins the tournament, and only one player is on the all-tourney team for Marquette. Only one. You get at least two, maybe three. One, because nobody saw anybody play but Dwayne Wade. I was there.
You know how good he is when regular players who are good players, but they're complementary players like John Harris and David Diggs. All of a sudden, David Diggs has an open shot. John Harris has a layup that's wide open. Why? Because Huggy was double teaming and triple teaming Dwayne Wade. And he was unselfish, and it was amazing to see how much better everybody around him got.
Well, at the risk of irritating every Marquette fan, it's exactly what's happening. And he's not as good as Dwayne Wade, but it's exactly what's happening with Wisconsin and Johnny Davis. Same thing. Yeah. Everybody else is better when it's not only the basketball part of it, but think of it. You walk on the floor. Every game, we got the best player on the floor. Doesn't mean it will happen, but the confidence it has to give everybody on that team. It certainly was the case with Marquette, even though they had other great players as last year, of course, with Travis Diener and Steve and others. But I mean, I can imagine the confidence. There are only 10 guys out there. We got the best one every second of this game.
Homer, what was it like that Kentucky game when Wade went crazy and stuffed the stat sheets and they upset Pitino's gang to get to the Final Four?
It was special to me because George Thompson was doing the game. And you can say whatever you want about the history of Marquette and the rivalries. No team did Marquette ever want to beat more than Kentucky for those that played in George Thompson's era and around then because of the view of Adolph Rupp in Kentucky. The joy that George Thompson felt because Marquette not only beat him, they crushed him. It was a parade. It was a fest second half. And to see the joy that he felt, and I've said the greatest moment I ever had, and I know it's the best I'll ever have, when Dwayne Wade came over after the game and George said, "You're the best to ever play at Marquette, both for what you've done and what you will do." And there's no way that George ever thought he would say that. It didn't matter how many points people scored. I don't think he believed that he would see a player that he believed was better than he was. And he saw it, and he said it, and he predicted Dwayne Wade's future in the NBA perfectly because he was pretty good in college. Best moment ever. There's no way it could.
Oh, sorry, Homer. At the beginning of the year, I don't know if you remember this, but at the Marquette Media Day in 2002, the two of us had Dwayne Wade. It was at the old gym, and the media had interviewed Wade, and we were the last two around him. And I asked him, "What have you been working on in the off season?" And the end of that first year that he played was a loss at Tulsa. And at the end of that Tulsa game, it was tie score. Tulsa hit 2 free throws. Crean didn't call a timeout because he didn't want Tulsa to change the defense or the personnel. They inbounded to Cordell Henry, and Crean gets up and he signals the elbow play, which I knew from watching the games was an ISO with Wade on the left side and a double pick for Diener coming around for a game-winning 3 if Wade couldn't get it up, couldn't get the shot up. And as Cordell Henry was dribbling the ball up, the pressure of the NCAA tournament game, his eyes were as big as silver dollars. And I thought, oh no, this moment's too big. Marquette's down by 2. So he dribbles it up and throws it to Wade, and D. Wade's eyes were as big as silver dollars too, and he wanted no part of that ball. And Henry cuts to the corner, and so Wade didn't move. Diener comes around the pick wide open, and Wade throws the ball to Henry in the corner, who then desperately throws it to Diener, and Diener's 30 feet away from the bucket. He throws the ball up. It hits the rim, bounces off of John Harris's head, and goes out of bounds at the buzzer. And Wade said, "I had to live all summer with the knowledge that I didn't want the ball at the end of that game. And every drill I did, every day, was based on that. That will never happen again in a game that I play in, that I'm going to run away from the ball at the end of a game." And he walked off, ended the interview, and I remember we looked at each other and thought, whoa, is this going to be a season? He was that motivated.
Yes, and it never happened. And I don't think it ever happened in any game at any time.
No.
Not in the pros, not in the Olympics, certainly not for Marquette.
I remember when Dwayne Wade had his news conference to announce that he was going pro, and Tom Crean saying, "You people who have covered D. Wade, count yourself privileged because he is going to be spectacular." I think we all felt he would be, but just didn't know that quickly and to that level. Buzz Williams, you and Buzz had and have a marvelous relationship, I think. What most stands out about that coach?
He was crazy too. I don't know. It's I think he's similar to Shaka in regard that they're very curious people. They're always searching. They're always looking for some edge. They're always doing something. And so there was just an incredible passion and the ability for him to have the impact he did on Marquette basketball. He was only an assistant coach for a year, and then all of a sudden next he becomes the head coach. And there was a toughness of all of the players that he required, and it's been the same ever since. But I think the same way that I kind of feel about Shaka, they're just fascinating people that you just kind of like to observe, and they're curious about everything. Shaka probably, he hasn't been around long enough to know for sure, but Buzz always had something new. One year it was this, and the next year was this, because he was just nonstop searching for a way to make his team better and his players better.
The way that Crean left. Crean left unexpectedly for Indiana on April 1st of 2008. And then Buzz was hired after a search on April 8th, 1 week later. And the way that Crean left, where I think he was burned a little bit by Indiana, where he was coming back to Milwaukee and some people at Indiana wanted that bridge burned before he got there and they announced it.
Oh, he wouldn't change his mind.
Yeah, right. So he wouldn't change his mind. And I remember Wesley Matthews and Dominic James were on the Stairmaster at the L Center, and they saw the crawl on ESPN that he was taking the Indiana job. And wow. But a week later, I was interviewing Jarrell McNeil, and I said, what do you think of this new coach, Buzz? And he said, I told Mr. Accords to call up Indiana and put Indiana on the schedule and not wait until next November to play them. Let's play them next week. Let's put it on TV, anywhere. I want to play Indiana right now. And with that, the way Crean left, it galvanized the veterans behind Buzz. They bought in right away and they did whatever it took just to kind of show that this wasn't a mistake and we're going to be better than we were under Crean.
Yeah, I mean, just as Shaka has, Buzz has a theory about how to win games. We're just, deep down, we're just going to be tougher than you are. And in terms of all the teams, his teams were probably more similar to Al McGuire's teams. McGuire didn't talk about it that way, but I remember watching Marquette when I was a kid going, they just can't shoot, but you're going to lose. When the game's over, they're going to have more points than you. And George never liked that when I tried to compare him to Cincinnati, because Cincinnati under Huggins was the same way. He said, Homer, don't ever compare us to Cincinnati. We were never the way they are as a team or the way they represent themselves. But there was a toughness on Al McGuire's teams that Buzz was the same way. We're going to be tougher, and in the end, we're going to win.
Watching those tapes of boot camp, and I think Buzz called his training camp boot camp because at the end of the week, everybody was wearing walking boots. They all had fractures or stress fractures or whatever. But what he would do to people, he'd go up to a player like Junior Cadogan and say, Junior, Chris O'Toole's struggling. Go up and help him. I know you're hurting. He was like watching the military training the Rangers to climb up Pointe du Hoc on D-Day or something. He was getting everybody on the same page, building the team up. And there's so many levels to Buzz in terms of motivation and toughness and strategy.
But it never changed, and Jimmy Butler's a good story on how many times they kicked him out of practice, or then the judgment of how good some players were. Buzz only got really mad at me once. He pulled me over one day and he says, how come you're so lazy? I go, what? Yeah, you're just so lazy. I go, well, why do you think I'm lazy? He goes, have you ever gone to practice? I go, no. You ever going to go to practice? No. Well, why don't you go to practice? You're just lazy. I said, why should I go to practice? What's the point of me going to practice? I don't care how they play in practice. He goes, well, don't you want to know what's going on? I said, not really, but Matt can handle that. I want to tell people what I see when they play in the games that count. I don't want to be that guy who says, well, he makes threes during practice. I can't believe he doesn't shoot well. I don't care what he does in practice, and I'm not going to be influenced if I don't go. But if you'd like me to go to practice, I'll go every day and sit in the corner and do whatever you want. He goes, you've actually given this some thought. I go, yes. No. Nobody in all these years, I've never gone. And Buzz, let me ask you, how many coaches do you think have ever asked why I didn't go to practice? He goes, I don't know. I said, you're the first. And when you leave, you'll still be the only one. Because nobody cares if I'm there or not. They care of the quality of broadcast and whether I'm accurate in what I see.
Homer, you've been.
Okay. So do you want me to come to practice? He goes, hell no.
That's beautiful. You've been so gracious with your time. I think we have a couple more for you, but we want to talk about Woj. A really great guy. The one comment you made that resonated with me was that one of his, I don't know if you want to say shortcomings, but he just didn't go out and recruit the type of player he was. And had he, it might have been a different story.
That's the oddest thing about him by far. I never asked him. He kind of ran the program the way Coach K does at Duke. You're either in the circle and the family there, or you're not in the circle. And with other coaches, I've probably been in the circle. With him, I wasn't, which wasn't a problem. But yes, every year they'd say, "Who's the toughest player in Marquette?" I know it's Mojo, but he never once recruited himself, and he's admired at Duke as being one of the toughest guys ever. But I'll always believe he thought they lost to Duke, and they did by Duke standard, because he wasn't good enough. He wasn't a good enough player. He didn't shoot well enough, or he wasn't quick enough. So he was continually, to me, searching not for a Wojo, but for players that had gifted skills. And that's just odd, because what Marquette needed during his time at Marquette was more Wojos. Mm-hmm. And someone would have to ask him, but I don't know what he would say. And he was also a little bit unlucky. I mean, you get a high seed in the tournament and you play Ja Morant. Who knew? And then the Hausers decide to leave, and I certainly don't blame him for that. And then you play South Carolina the year they go to the Final Four, and that results in the inability to win a tournament game. But as far as overall, and the feelings about his recruiting is vastly overrated. I mean, how many players did he have that played in the NBA versus Buzz, for example? And, I mean, Ellenson played because he got in with a first-round pick, and then he disappeared. Marcus Howard's trying to play. You wonder how much he'll play. And then look at how many players from Buzz Williams' era that are in the NBA. So I question whether the players were as good as everybody thought, even though they might have been touted or higher ranked on the list.
Steve the Homer True, brought to you by Moonlight Graham, proud sponsor of our program. Moonlight Graham, modern dental benefits. He's a marvelous golfer, obviously a very good tennis player. His passion, though, is calling Marquette University basketball games.
Homer is one of the more interesting personalities I've ever met in the city. He's got background where he grew up in South Bend, so he understands the Notre Dame thing. He attended the University of Wisconsin, so he understands that. And he's covered Marquette for 33 years. So he understands how kind of our major teams interact, and knows the passion that from all sides.
Awesome just to get his take on all those coaches for Marquette University basketball, past and present. All right, JD, you've got a website that'll keep everybody up to date.
It's marquettehoops.com. We will follow Marquette, the coaches and their recruiting. We'll also archive all the shows. So if we've had 13 shows now, so if you have a Marquette fan that would like to look at one of our old shows, we'll archive them. If you can send them a link via email, that would be great. And if you want to be on our newsletter, just put your email in that little widget right there, and you should be good to go.
You know what's great for me on a Saturday morning? Hanging with you and our producer, Jason Bruck. John Dodds, thank you very much.
Likewise.
Thank you. That's the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show on My 24. I'm Tom Pippins. Thanks, everybody. God bless, and go Golden Eagles.